put on the boat by his parents and trying to jump back onto the dock as the boat pulled away. And in his case, he never saw his parents again. They died overseas, and that was true for many of the young people. Sometimes their experience was mitigated by the fact they might have an older sibling who was attending Denison at the time, which could give them a little bit of a family experience, but that was a minority of circumstances. The early superintendents of the home were women, and most of the residents who left reminiscences had sort of fond recollections of their efforts to try to make this as family-like an environment and as warm an environment as possible. But in 1940, a male was appointed as the superintendent, a guy named Stan Cummings, who was best described as Victorian in his way of running things. He wasn't above corporal punishment, or at least, at the very least, verbal abuse to the young people. Some of them said his wife was much tenderer, and she would try to pick up the pieces afterwards, but nobody, couldn't really succeed in doing that if you'd been belittled enough. Their parents paid about $150 or $200 a year, so there was a cost to this. It didn't cover the full cost of keeping them there. This was mostly run on the charity of Baptists. But $150 or $200, a portion of that was rebated to the kids. They got an allowance from the money that their parents left. But as I mentioned a minute ago, it was very typical for them to seek little jobs around town, or even on the grounds of the home itself, so they would have a little bit of spending money throughout the year.
Were the grounds of the home in Grand?
Right on Broadway, right on the main street, with the College Hill sort of behind it. So it's only about a block and a half from today's lower campus in Denison. Early on, the Baptist managers of the home recognized that it was tough on the kids, and that they needed some kind of a occupying experience, an engaging experience during the summer months to help them get through the year. So in the 1920s, they began sending them as a group to various camps. They went to a place called Pigeon Lake Camp, which is a little bit north of Holland, Michigan, near the Lake Michigan shoreline. They went to a Three Rivers Camp, which is south of Kalamazoo in southern Michigan. Then they had a debate. Where could they go long term? And I found some archives of the Baptist Foreign Mission Society where the Associate Secretary said, there was a long debate about choosing Lakeside. They were worried about the wholesomeness, and finally they decided that Lakeside would be safe, that even the movies shown there would be safe, because it was, quote, a Chautauqua kind of thing run by the Methodists. Mrs. Doane, Frances Doane, Fanny Doane, not to be confused with Fanny Crosby, Fanny Doane, before she died in 1923, had given some money to support summer experiences. And so they had some capital to do something with. And so in the winter of 1929-1930, the ABFMS, American Baptist Foreign Mission Society, contracted with Lakeside to buy 4 lots on 6th Street between Peach and Plum. And ultimately they bought 4 more. So they had a total of 8 lots to build the Fanny Doane Cottage. Camp Fanny Doane grew as the Fanny Doane home grew. In the early 30s, I mentioned they added the annex for older kids and a garage for the superintendent's car. And also, I didn't check this out. I've been all through the property. Apparently, there was a shower stall built in the garage, which really was for showering off dusty and sandy kids before they came into the home. But we've all been there at Lakeside. They located it where they did. It's going to be hard to see, because this is a 1946 Sanborn fire map. Here's the Fanny Doane home. There's not much happening in the south end of Lakeside. And in 1929-30 was built. There's even less happening. So there are not many cottages, whole empty blocks. Here's would be where the tennis courts are today, and the pool down here, and the maintenance building down there. The other attraction to it was all of this land, were the playing fields, and even some woodland that kids could romp in. They remembered, the kids remembered the same things that today's, I think, young people remember. When I looked at these reminiscences in the scrapbook, they said things like this: starting as early as April, we eagerly awaited the day we would drive to Lakeside. Because what would they do? They swimming, croquet on the grounds of the Fanny Doane camp, baseball, tennis, the Hoover programs. And just as they did in Granville, where they trooped down the street to the Baptist church on Sunday morning, 2 by 2, holding hands, they did the same thing to Hoover. They would go to Hoover worship, 2 by 2, marching on a group. One of the reminiscences said the Lakeside Dock was the social center for us. We frequently spent entire days sunning, swimming, and girl watching. Surprise, surprise. Our favorite one, and some of you remember this, I remember this, were the Marblehead Stacks, a crystal clear body of water which was adventurous to swim in. It's where the old lime kiln was, up on the tip of the peninsula. There's a little state park there now. Yeah. But when I was a kid, the stacks, or parts of the stacks, were still there. It probably was adventurous swimming, because I'm not sure how deep that water was in the old quarry. And quarries are hazardous places, which is kind of funny, because actually there is a letter, speaking of adventurous, from the Associate Secretary of the Foreign Mission Society. She had gotten wind that some of the boys wanted to build themselves a sailboat. And they found somebody who could help them build a wooden sailboat. And she said, oh, I'm not going to tell you no, but you got to watch out. So we thought long and hard about Lakeside, and one of the things we had to overcome, this will be a great surprise to the Kids Setting Sail group, were the treacherous currents and winds of Lake Erie off of Lakeside. It just doesn't make it suitable for sailing. So you know, I think about this twice, and I don't know whether they ever built their boat or not, but she was quite worried. It was sort of, dear friend, think about the danger you may be subjecting yourself and other children to. One of the people at this reunion, a fellow came back to Lakeside. He was up at the reunion in Granville, decided to take the additional drive on up to Lakeside in 1993 or 94 after the season. 50 years, I guess it was 94. He'd last been here in 44. And interestingly, as he walked around, it was out of season, so it was quiet, he thought it looked much the same. He was amazed how little changed it was. One thing that struck him is that he had changed. He said he walked down along the lake where he saw the wonderful benches for watching the sunset, or listening to the waves lap against the shore. He said, when I was here before, that was for old people. Now it seemed pretty good. He was surprised that Camp Fanny Doane was surrounded by cottages now. The big auditorium still looked big, though maybe not quite as big as it had looked as a small child. And he again was reminded of the freedom that the kids experienced at Lakeside. It was a big deal in Granville when the kids left each year, and the Granville Times, the local paper, wrote every year the exact day that the kids were leaving the Fanny Doane home and going to Camp Fanny Doane. There was sort of a little headline that they were going to Camp Fanny Doane. Maybe that was in part because so many of them were employed, again, in little jobs by local retailers, and suddenly they were gone. And apparently it was a big deal for Lakeside, because not only was it reported in the Lakeside paper, but the Sandusky Register every year had a little headline announcing the arrival of the Fanny Doane home children at Camp Fanny Doane. And it may also be a big deal for Lakeside because many of the kids worked while they were here. They worked in the restaurants and dining facilities, and did other odd jobs around the ground. After about 1940, there were some ominous signs that the end of Camp Fanny Doane was near. As World War II got underway, many, but not all of the missionaries came back to the United States. They fled the violence. And in 1941, the Granville Times reported that the Fanny Doane home was closed for the summer, not just because some of the kids were coming to Camp Fanny Doane at Lakeside, but that others were getting together with their families, who were obviously back on furlough or escaping from the war. Fewer began showing up at Lakeside. When the last kid graduated from Granville High School and the Fanny Doane home closed, so did Camp Fanny Doane. It was sold back to Lakeside for $1 in 1957. The association bought it back. But as early as 1955, while the Baptists still owned it, it began serving other groups. In fact, there's a Sandusky Register headline from 1958 about the Akron Goodwill Association, the Goodwill offices, sending 172 staff and their families for a summer outing at Camp Fanny Doan. And apparently they'd done that for several years. William Howard and Frances Fanny Doan would have been pleased by that. And they'd be pleased that Hilltop House and Annex continue to serve Lakeside today. Not much has changed physically. Here's an old outline of the rooms in Fanny Doan Home and Annex. And here are the interior. Here's some interior shots. The fancy room is the living room, right off behind the porch on the left. The kitchen, most of it, that's just the exterior wall attached to the studs. So there's no insulation anywhere. That's the annex, which is essentially 2 rooms. And when I was there, I noticed security let me in the other day when there was nobody there. They've been noticing toilet paper was disappearing from public restrooms all over the grounds. The kids were storing it up. We think not for use. Security thinks they were planning a teepee raid. And they got wind of it, and they told whatever group was up there that better not happen. But all that, there are rolls and rolls of toilet paper up there on the rafter. As I said before, it's stayed busy all summer. A tennis group just left. The main building sleeps in tight quarters 35. And the annex has beds for 23. And as you see, it's primitive. We, the Lakeside Association, rented out for the main building, or the 2 buildings together, for $370 a night. Or just the main building for $275, and the smaller building, the annex, for $155. Basic housing, fairly basic price, particularly if you fill it up. But it's a real reminder, I think. It's a reminder, not only does it continue to serve, particularly youth, but it's a reminder of Lakeside's history of ecumenism, a reminder of its history with youth work, reminder of a connection that most people don't know with a college, a connection with Christian evangelism around the world, a connection with composer William Howard Doan, and with the blind poetess Fanny Crosby. In other words, not just toilet paper, but a lot of history up on those back. What questions might you have? Yeah.
How long a time would the children be there in the summer?
They would be there, they would usually come in June, because they were driven by the school year.
Yeah.
They would come in June and stay till late August.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they spend the whole, it was a whole summer experience. So they would come in June and stay till late August. Yeah, Dave?
Do you know if they were actually here in 59?
In 59,
I'm
they,
49, I'm sorry.
49, let's see. In 49, they would, I don't think they would have been here. Because the home closed when the last kid graduated from Granville High School in May or June of 49.
We went in the ground crew right about that time. I was 49 with my last pre-army year in the ground crew. And we went in, and the building was in terrible, the big building was in terrible shape. And we figured as soon as the association got it, it was coming down.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real survival story, isn't it, about the facility itself, particularly when you see it's pretty bare bones. And it's survived. Maybe that's why it survived, it's bare bones.
We came with a youth group in 1980 and somebody fell through the kitchen floor.
Oh my goodness, yeah. It seems, I went all through it about 3 weeks ago. It seems, I didn't fear falling through the floor, but it reminded me of some of the cottages that we rented in my childhood in the mid-1950s, which were just the studs and the bare walls and the, yeah.
Betty and I have a story about the Hilltop House. Betty just now figured, she says it was 1974. A Sunday school class from our church at Bowling Green, First Methodist, decided to have a retreat. So we came over here for the weekend, Friday evening, and we hired Mrs. Wadsworth. That name mean anything to you? She did square dance, called square dance around. So she came out and called square dance. You talk about the floor. We had that house just rocking.
I can see that.
So we decided each one of us would kind of do our thing. And one of the couples, lady was real good, watercolor. We went over and played tennis. We had different little projects as a group. But two couples went out and went to Smith Realty and began to look at cottages. And Christopher's that eventually bought the Popcorn Palace. Swanson bought,
Butters Castle.
yeah, and then also the house just a couple, and of course he got involved in some other real estate. Betty and Jerry Locke bought their cottage. Peggy and I bought our cottage. We all bought cottages.
Because you were introduced to Lakeside
We came to
through.
Lakeside and had that. Well, some of our kids had been over here for youth.